everyone. This is your teacher, Miss Mars, and on today's video lecture, I am going to continue my discussion on Unit 4. Previously, we already tackled about Lesson 1, and on today's video lecture, we are going to explore Lesson 2, and hopefully we could also explore Lesson 3. So let's find out. I know you all are ready. Thus, without further ado, let's begin. Okay, so in the previous discussion class, we look into the materials for the teaching of grammar. And this time, lesson 2 would bring us to the materials for the teaching vocabulary. So it is very important that when we teach language and when our learners are learning language, vocabulary is one of the basic foundation. If you could recall when we were younger and we were studying English language, there were a lot of vocabulary being introduced to us through various texts. And in fact, if you would also recall, you could also recall, we had also flashcards with us. So maraming mga sources. We have so many sources on how do we teach vocabulary to our learners. And sa ato ang case, how do we learn vocabulary when we were younger? So let's try to take a look at now in deep about materials for the teaching of vocabulary. So an ideal vocabulary learning method is this one, okay? It is tailored and learner-oriented, meaning we really created our teaching or the way we teach vocabulary to our learners based on their needs, no? And at the same time, learner-oriented siya. So basically, we put the learners in the middle or in the center of our creation of the material. So tailored and learner-oriented. So kumbaga, we really have, kailangan talaga nating isipin or we need to really think of our learners. So what kind of learners do we have? Ano ang level nila? Because if their level is higher, of course, you don't teach them lower level vocabulary. So you have to consider that. Second, fosters learner autonomy. So we have to teach them strategies on how they can learn vocabulary from the text that they are reading. Marami yan eh. There are so many strategies. If you are reading a certain text, you can use the context clues, not only rely on on dictionary, but we can make use of clues that we can find in the context. So that could be one. And as teachers, we should not always be there to really, every word we just teach them. So the learners should be able to have strategies, or they should be able to strategize. No, how could they get vocabulary? Okay, from what they have seen. They should be able to strategize. So how would they do it? Okay, how would they create or how would they be able to extract the word that is not familiar to them, and how would they be able to get the meaning? Okay, it could be making use of the clues in the context, or pag hindi kaya talaga, there is, if it is a novel class or if it is a story, probably there are really a lot of clues that you can find in the context, no? But if hindi talaga kaya, of course, you can have the help of the dictionary. And also provides vocabulary learning strategies. Okay, so provides vocabulary learning strategies. So our method should embed, okay, should touch or talk about a certain strategy that would allow our learners to learn the vocabulary. It should also monitor their progress. So of course, dapat we have to have that through practice or examination so that we would be able to know what is now their level, no? And then takes the complexity of vocabulary acquisition into account. So we need also to consider the complexity of vocabulary acquisition. So like if it is we are talking about children or young learners, of course simple lang yung vocabulary. But if you are talking about our students sa mga high school or a junior, senior high school students, of course, that would be a little complex. 'Di ba? Hindi naman pwede that we are talking about something very basic to our students in the high school or our students in high school when in fact English was taught since they were in elementary. And then emphasizes varied, contextualized activities with a mixed modality approach. So varied, that means iba-iba, and contextualized activities, we have to make sure that it fits their context, okay? Or that everything is not strange kasi you're talking about the specific context of the learners. So, kung baga, we have unfamiliar term, but if we are going to make it localized or if we are going to apply it to the context of the learners, so obviously they will retain or it would be easier for them to retain what they have learned kasi they always use it, diba? That's why contextualized activities. There are so many activities as long as we make it contextualized and then we also make use of another approach, so mixed modality approach. These are the things that we have to consider since it's creation of materials class. So for example, maghimo mo og lesson plan, how to teach a vocabulary to your learners. So you have to make sure na we consider these. Okay, this is in principle, but then we have to put it on paper, and then after creating the lesson plan or even material module or even a book, or a workbook somehow, you make sure that we could really apply these theories or these principles, okay? Because it is the ideal learning vocabulary, okay? An ideal vocabulary learning method. Next, vocabulary teaching, it has the goal of supporting language use across the skills. So if we teach vocabulary, it really touches all skill, di ba? Kasi pag listening, nakakarinig ang mga bata and then the word that they heard or that they listened, it's familiar, so it would be easier for them. No, they can understand. There will be comprehension. Speaking, if you know very few vocabulary, of course it's difficult for you to speak. And then reading, I could attest to that, that reading is really important also that we are familiar on the words that we are reading. Because I can attest to that if we are not familiar, it would really be difficult to pronounce it properly, or it would be difficult to parse our sentence, no? So, diba, we read by thought units, okay? So when we read by thought units, we make sure we pause in the specific unit that completes a certain thought. Okay, we pause at a certain unit with a complete thought. For example, it could be a phrase. Okay, then because in a sentence we have to pause. Hindi pwede na we don't pause. And if we don't understand a word, it's very difficult. We don't know where to pause. And I can attest to that because I'm learning, foreign language, Korean language. And what happened is when I read and I don't understand, it really, it becomes like that. That is what's going to happen. I just read and just don't pause. And it's not natural. And it really appears awkward. And of course, you could really say that perhaps the one reading does not really understand what she reads or what he reads. And then, of course, writing. One of the reasons why we have difficulty to write is because we have very limited vocabulary. Imagine, class, if we have a lot of vocabulary, it would be easier for us to write because we don't have to check our dictionary, Merriam dictionary, and check it from time to time because we just don't know the word. And also better output will be will be produced if we have a lot of vocabulary. And there has been considerable debate, especially in first language teaching, how this can be done. So number one, deliberate learning can only account for a small proportion of the vocabulary knowledge of learners. So it's true that small proportion of the vocabulary knowledge of learners. Now, when we talk about deliberate learning, and deliberate learning, not in a communicative context, does not result in much learning. If we are not going to make use of the communicative strategy or approach, and also put it in the context of our learners, the lesser chance that they learn something, because everything is not familiar, diba? Pero if we apply it to the context of our learners, mas dali siya because they can relate. And also, if we also notice, if ang student class, they are not really wide readers, we cannot assure that students learn massive vocabulary. Okay. So students would really learn a lot of vocabulary if they read. Okay. So that's why, as teachers, we have to expose them to a lot of text. Okay. Something that, of course, they can handle, and also something that would allow them to learn new vocabulary. Deliberate learning, not in a communicative context, does not help learner later vocabulary used in communicative context. So this is what's going to happen if we are not going to um, allow our learners or give them opportunity to learn in the context that they knew. Diba? Kita taga Philippines man ta. So we have our specific context. If we compare to people coming from different countries, okay, we have different context man. And since we are in the Philippines, if we learn something that is the context of people coming from different countries, of course, the vocabulary that we are learning would not help us to communicate well. Good example is in Europe, diba, they say lift. That is elevator here. Now, if we are going to teach lift and let the learners use that, when they go to hotels or wherever that requires them to use elevator, and they will ask the receptionist or the front desk officer, where is the lift? So obviously, if kaibaw ang officer, it's okay. But what is commonly used in the Philippines? It's elevator. So we have to teach them according to the context para when they go out, they can use it. Of course, I am not discouraging you class to teach them the British way or teach them also words from the British English. But make sure that just for their information lang, okay? Para they can have a certain idea kay pwede mon po, especially if kaning mga tourism students or mga tourism, because kita kamo mga English majors, obviously you will deal with learners, diba, mga students. Pero let's say, for example, tourism students, and then dili na to sila po i-expose into varieties of English, especially American and British English. They have a lot of kuan man chances to be exposed with these kind of people because they are tourism practitioners. So if they don't also know lift and the other terms in the British English, and what is its counterpart in the American English, that is the challenge. No, okay, if they will come across with a guest who definitely is a British, so when that British is, oh, where is the lift? Okay, and then you don't know. So of course it would be difficult to answer. So it would create a communication gap. So in that case, the tourism student should learn that because in the work that they will have, they have to know. And kita po teachers, since you are teachers, should also learn that. So what I'm trying to say is we can give it as an information to our learners, but in terms of usage, especially here in the Philippines, we have to use elevator. Okay? Para, because language mangod plus, it is created for understanding, diba? We don't talk because we just want to sound like um we're highly educated, or because we just want to sound that, oh, I am superior than you. But always remember, why are we learning the language is for us to be able to communicate. That is why, mauni siya ha, it is not okay. For example, you have kids and then you just want to teach your kids English language. Remember, where is the child's birth country and where is that child living? In the Philippines. Now, if you are only going to teach the child English, do you think it's okay? No. Let your child or your sister, your younger brother be bilingual or multilingual. Because if you only teach the child English, do you think that child will have a good life? I mean, have a fun life? No. Because we are in the Philippines, so they should know, the child should know the mother tongue or the native language to communicate with people in the community, right? In the market and all that. Tuluan sa in English, pero dili kay English lang because the English, of course, we also use it for formal situations and institutions. No, for example, sa government offices, we use English sometimes, and also on TV. So part na sa siya. So that's why we have to make sure multilingual ang mga students or ang mga bata. Hindi pwede class that we just teach them English just because to really, para mura lang sila og rich because when they speak English, we associated that child is rich, right? So I would, tell you that once you become parents, make sure that you teach your children not only one language, not only English, but make sure also they know their very own native language. Our first language should be that, and then can go on with the next, no? English for sure, and other languages. So, if these are the things, class, of course, mo fail ta sa pagtudlo og vocabulary sa tong learners. If we are going to teach them with a small proportion of the vocabulary, so we have to expose our learners to text. And then also communicative context, this is really the key word. So, para mas daghan, students will have more vocabulary to learn. And we have here vocabulary levels and text coverage. Actually, exams like IELTS, TOEFL, they actually make use of this, to identify the level of the student or of the learner. So high frequency, mid frequency, low frequency, and also the coverage. And there are also others. So on high frequency class, of course, high frequency, these are the words that students or the learners will be able to understand by sight. Okay, kung makita lang na niya, kahit sabot na siya ana. So that's why it's high frequency, because usually, of course, obviously, the learner here does not need vocabulary. He or she can understand it. And the coverage would be 90. So kay daghan jud ang high frequency, no? And mid frequency, that is 6,000 words. So kaning high frequency, commonly used po ni siya because the student can grasp it anytime without looking at the dictionary, and of course easier for him or her to understand. And the low frequency, it's 10th, of course, 1,000 word family level, so the coverage should only be 1 to 2. And then the other, of course, kana ng mga gagmay na lang yun, the coverage would be 3 to 4. So of course, you don't know all abbreviations, you don't know all compounds and the likes, but ang high frequency, these are the words that by sight or on site, we just learn, which we understand it. So that's why we have the sight words. So kaning mga sight words, the child here, when they learn it and then they use it, or they can hear it and they can read it, no need for dictionary, they understand. So that's why high frequency. And through this, we'll be able to define your vocabulary level. No, kung under ba ka sa what is your high frequency level, the mid frequency, low frequency. So things like that. The total is 100. I'm not going to explain this really farther because you can come across with this one, especially if you're going to take standardized examinations. And then just a rejoinder, table 17.1, this one, of course, shows 4 types of vocabulary under typical coverage of text. And learners who have control of the high frequency words and who are studying for academic purposes need to quickly become familiar with general academic vocabulary. So if the learner has a lot of words, nga iyang gigamit mga high frequency words, so of course, he or she will be able to become familiar, especially pag nag-study siya with the academic vocabulary. It would be easier for her. So now let's go to designing output activities to help vocabulary learning. So recent work on spoken communicative activities has shown that careful design of the written input for such activities can have a major effect on vocabulary learning. So of course, class kinahanglan, we have to create our activities carefully. And of course, we put it first on paper before we implement it, right? So what I am trying to say is, especially if you are going to create a lesson plan. So when you create a lesson plan, you have to make sure you design activities that would allow our learners to learn vocabulary. And that is possible because we have the follow-up activity. We even have the if you guys follow the SAFE method when you create the lesson plan. S is for stimulating activity. That's where you have to make um, you have to present your springboard, okay? And then we also have the actual activity. So the actual, that's of course would allow you to do the lecture at the same time the drills, okay, within the lecture. And you have the follow-up activity. So here you will give them um, practices because you already discussed. And the last would be the evaluations. In the evaluation, we'll let our learners answer. Okay, and we have here an example, the written input. So the written input, you can have group A. So the group A could be around the age of 18, and children should be encouraged to leave home and take care of themselves. Okay, your group has to present the ideas which support this. Okay, this is the issue actually. Around the age of 18 ko, no, this is the issue, no, you can raise this issue. Around the age of 18, children should be encouraged to leave home and take care of themselves. So you can, for that group, the group has to present the ideas which support this. Okay, you do not have to argue in favor of these ideas, but you must make sure that the ideas which support it are well understood by everybody before a decision is made. So you have to just lay down on the table what are the ideas that support this premise. You can make use of, citations, or pwede ka tong mga research, mga journals, so pang mag-extract mo, you can extract, and it would be easier. Okay. Next, first step, look at the following ideas. Okay. Explain them to each other in your group so that everyone understands them. Okay, like you have already listed ideas that support the premise. So imong i-explain sa ubang group, then put the ideas in order according to their importance with the strongest idea first. So it would be in ascending order. Think of one example for each idea to help you explain it to others during the second step. Okay, so each idea that you created or that you presented, dapat na ay example to explain. Okay, so children will learn to be, for example, these are the ideas. Not children will learn to be responsible for their own decisions. Second, children will learn how to handle their finances. Third, children and parents will have a better relationship with each other. And the fourth, the parents can save for their retirement because, of course, the children do not depend on them because they become independent. Second step, so these are now the supporting ideas. Second step, your group will now split up. Okay, so magbuwag-buwag na, and you will join with some people from the other group. So you must all work together to decide if you all support or do not support the idea about children leaving home. So group B has similar input. Okay, ang katos siya pilmero group A. Group B has similar input except that they have to understand the arguments attacking the idea of children leaving home. They have the following list at the first step. Number one, children at 18 years old are not mature enough to be responsible for their own decisions. So the group B now is going to give the rebuttal. No? Children should support their parents and help them with the household work. And then, while at home, children can save money to help themselves make a good financial start in life. So, if we are going to take a look at here, obviously there is a vocabulary learning process that is happening in this activity, diba? I input, okay, then I learning, and then of course speaking as well. So it is a an interconnected process. If you notice what's happening here in the brain and together with the speaking and even the listening, diba? Because they are sharing. And then out from the sharing, they would be able to use the vocabulary at the same time, learn new vocabulary from their classmates. So obviously all the writing is also, if you allow them, you would ask them to write, right? So perhaps mostly the macro skills are used, but technically listening, reading, and speaking, okay, are the ones that are very, very evident here. Okay, we have the input, and then we have the learning, and then speaking. Okay, and it's a cycle. It's a cycle. It's a process. Because, okay, group A, they are giving details. So that are the details that group A give definitely, give those are inputs and allow the next group to decide, understand if they are pro or not, if they are pro or anti or not, or anti, based on the premise that you presented. So planning vocabulary, that was just class an example activity. Planning vocabulary learning. Studies of the statistical distribution of vocabulary confirm what designers of grader readers have put into practice for many years. So for me, really, you really have to make sure that you, of course, consider the grade of your readers or your learners. And it's very important to allow our learners to learn vocabulary. Okay. Namely, there is a relatively small group of words, around 3,000, that are much more frequent and useful in a very wide range of language uses than other words in the language. So also, it is not a hidden reality, class, that when we talk, we don't really use all the words, okay, in that language. No, because our daily life, we know our routine, the kind of situations that we will be in usually, and what are the frequent words that we are going to use, diba? Greetings always. And when we come across with people, unsa may mga words nga atong gamiton, we don't use highfalutin words katong mga very unfamiliar. We don't use that, no, unless we are dealing with academic endeavors or mga very technical group, mga ingana. Pero that's not everyday, situation that we are going to encounter. So that is why only very, small group of words kaning mga frequent and useful in a very wide range of language uses than other words in the language. Okay, and these high frequency words are the essential basis of all language use and deserve a great deal of attention in language teaching material. So kaning high frequency words, since they are commonly used, so these are the basis of all language use, and we have to make sure that we will deal with them with so much attention when we are going to create a language teaching material, specifically if we want our learners to enrich their vocabulary. And ang nakanindot magud, class, pag we allow our learners to learn words that can be used, usually used, is that they know that they are learning the right things. Kay automatic, they can get it from their brain, they can get it from their pocket, and they just use it. Pero mag tudlo ta sa mga bata, ya katong mga words imong itudlo nga di po nila magamit kaayo. Of course, class, that is really not very appreciative. They won't be appreciative because the lesser the chance to use that language or to use that vocabulary, the higher the higher the chance that it will be forgotten. 'Di ba? For example, we are learning a foreign language. It's okay, but the problem really is if there is no chance to use it, then we memorize it, we learn it, but then no chance of using it, so it will just be forgotten. Unless if, of course, you constantly use it because you are working and all that, so you're working using that language, then that would be really, it retained. So unless learners have very special needs, so it makes little sense to focus on other vocabulary before most of these high frequency words have been well learned. Okay, so according to the Quran, if the learners have special needs, mauna siya nga, we may not focus right away on the frequency word. But if walay special needs, so go on with the frequency words so that the learners will be able to use all these words. Okay. And then designing output activities to help vocabulary learning. Recent work on spoken communicative activities has shown that careful design of the written input for such activities can have a major effect on vocabulary learning. So we have to be very careful. Okay, we have also to be selective and also know the level of our learner. There are some reasonably straightforward design requirements to ensure that the vocabulary will be used in the activities and that it will be used in ways that set up the most favorable conditions for learning. So dapat straightforward ang ato ang design. Okay? Para we are sure that our learners learn the vocabulary out of that activity. So, usually class unsaon man pag-learn sa mga bata og vocabulary, 'di ba? So there are so many ways. Earlier I gave you one, it was a group activity, but not only that, a lot of activities. One of the ways, especially if we are also dealing with mga senior or junior high school, is by letting them read a text, and out from the text we have to have we have to have an activity. Okay. So let us look at an example of a speaking activity called for and against to see what design requirements are and how they can be applied. So earlier, the written input, diba? Group A, around the age of 18, children should be encouraged to leave home and take care of themselves. This is a speaking activity, but because when we speak, we use of vocabulary, so we could be able to extract words coming from our group mates or coming from our classmates. So your group has to present the ideas which support this. Okay, you do not have to argue. That is the first. No need to argue in favor of these ideas, but you must make sure that the ideas which support it are well understood by everybody before a decision is made. So that's why you list the series of ideas that that could support the premise. But then you don't argue, you just want to present it and make sure you explain it para makasabot sila. And from there, they will be able to come up with a decision. So first step, look at the following ideas, explain them to each other in your group so that everyone understands them. Second, then put the ideas in order according to their importance, as ang pinaka-importante as ang least important, with the strongest idea first. Think of one example for each idea to help you explain it to others during the second step. Next, children will learn to be responsible for their own decisions. Mauni ang mga ideas, ha? Then children will learn how to handle their finances. It's already presented also before, no? Children and parents will have a better relationship with each other, and the parents can save for their retirement. These are the supporting ideas why it's okay that student or that children at the age of 18 leave home and be independent. And then the second step, your group will now split up and you will join with some people from the other group. So working together. Okay, group B has similar input except that they have to understand the arguments attacking the idea of children leaving home, and they have the following list at the first. So children at 18 years old are not mature enough, diba? And then children po kuno should support their parents and help them with the household work. While at home, children can save money to help themselves make a good financial start in life. So I am just now trying to repeat para ma-refresh na to ang gatong activity nga gihatag earlier. So through this class, your students are making use of the vocabulary that they learned through this activity. At the same time, they learn new words coming from their classmates. You can even ask them to list also alongside with this, no, since para gid sila makapaminaw, you can also let them list words that they find are key words on this activity. Then you can let them define or describe. Then you know pretty well that they understand the words or the key words. Let us now look at some design requirement and the features of this activity which make it likely to support vocabulary learning. Number one, the written input to the task contains about 12 target words. And the vocabulary, so muna na inyong buhaton, and then the vocabulary is highlighted and repeated in the written input where possible to increase its chances of being noticed and used, because the more frequent the vocabulary is used, the more the higher chance that it can be noticed by the listener. So that's why I told you you could also create another activity alongside with it, that you would ask the learners to list down the keywords. And the communicative task has a clear outcome which encourages the use of the written input. And split information, jobs, or roles are used to make sure that all learners are actively involved in the activity. The task should be broken into a series of steps to give a chance for the words in the written input to be reused at each step. And the communication task supports the understanding of the target language. And that is the best way to learn vocabulary. Because if you notice here, they learn vocabulary not just how it is being used in a text. Diba? Kay, kung naatay text class, essay, or novel, story, will they learn vocabulary based on how it is being used in the text. But here in this activity, they learn vocabulary based on how they use it. And they learn from it and they can extract it. They are the ones who are using it. So the more very useful ang vocabulary nga ilang na-learn. Okay, because you can let them, there are 12 target words that you may have, pwede ninyo ma-target or pila. So it's up to you. You can even allow also or suggest words nga magamit pud nila in presenting their ideas. So you can play with this activity. So the second question, class, that I am going to ask you, and we will have it also in our feedbacking, what language learning materials do you need to conduct these vocabulary learning activities? So I already gave you an activity or an example activity that you can use when you create a lesson plan, no? When you teach vocabulary to your learners. So what language learning materials do you think would supplement so that the execution of these vocabulary learning activities would be engaging, and it would be worthwhile, it would be more effective? So think of language learning materials. Okay. And then the design features of these activities will directly affect the conditions for learning that occur. Let us look at some of the most important features, diba? Kinahanglan nakafocus ta sa language items. We also need to make sure we focus on the system of the language, okay? Because each language is different system. Group work and data gathering or gap filling, diba? When they create na atay data gathering, and at the same time, we also fill in the gap, okay, that we can find, or the problem that we can see. We have to fill it in terms of their usage of vocabulary, in terms of other level of the vocabulary. And then we have here fluency development. So when we talk about vocabulary class, we have to make sure our students also are fluent. So kinahanglan i-develop na to ilang fluency. Now, the fluency development activities have the goal of making language items like vocabulary readily available for fluent use. If vocabulary cannot be fluently accessed, so kita na kay bawta og vocabulary pero cannot be fluently accessed, then the vocabulary learning probably, it failed. Okay, wala kaayo siya gamit or little purpose. Kay kung dili fluent ang estudyante sa kanang vocabulary, siguro for sure wa niya na nagamit, no? You may have taught that, but then ang iyang fluency wala na develop, so that's why wala siya chance to take it out from his pocket, di ba? Ang atong brain, it's series of pockets. Gipamutang na tong mga words diha. Wala siya'y chance, wala siya'y experience, or there is no opportunity to take it out from his brain and use it. So that's why walay fluency. Okay, activities for developing fluency in vocabulary use do not differ from fluency activities with other fluency goals. So I'm not telling you that we don't teach our learners with unfamiliar words. Of course, that's why they have to learn more vocabulary. But as teachers, it's good also that we allow them to use what they have learned or to use the vocabulary that they have learned. And then this is because fluency development requires meaning-focused language use. At the same time, kinahanglan pud class ato ang ipakita kung unsay meaning. Okay, we use it in context. We use it with the text, or we use it in a text, and we also let them understand the meaning. Because if you don't understand the meaning, you cannot take it out from your head and use it. You may not even remember it, and this needs to be done without any particular focus on language feature. It's very important for us, for our students to develop fluency in the usage of vocabulary or words, is for them to know the exact meaning of that word. And fluency development requires different learning conditions, from learning from meaning focused input and output and language focused learning. So fluency with text, oral reading fluency has three parts: accuracy, fluency, the reading speed, and then the fluency would come with the prosody. The prosody, it is the patterns of stress and intonation in a language. Okay, so when you talk about it, you have to make sure also you have that rhythm, or you have the stress, the proper intonation. Because prosody class in linguistics, it is actually concerned with those elements of speech that are not individual, phonetic segments. What I'm talking about, individual phonetic segments, we have the consonants and the vowels, but they actually come along with bigger properties, such as the one with the syllables at the same time with the larger units, and we use them in speech. And these are what we call the soprasegmentals. The soprasegmentals, we have intonation, stress, juncture. So when we talk about fluency with text, we have to know that. Okay? Accuracy, fluency, reading speed. Pag moingon tag fluency, we have to make sure that we also make use of the proper soprasegmentals. Okay, we make use of intonation, we know when to stress. Diba? Kay posible ba when we don't stress it in the proper syllable, it could have a different meaning. And with that, the listener would be able to know the emotions of the speaker. So that's why we have here the fluency with text, and we have here under the fluency the prosody. And then we have here effective literacy instruction, diba? Phonemic awareness. I'm sorry, we have phonemic awareness. We to go with the sound first, and then we have the phonics. Actually, learners are exposed with this kind of mga younger learners, diba? Phonics, reading fluency, and then they will learn vocabulary. And then if they know vocabulary, they would have comprehension and at the same time spelling. So this is a cycle, okay? Phonemic awareness, phonics, reading fluency, vocabulary, reading comprehension, and we know they know the spelling. If we have all these, we know that we have an effective literacy instruction. And then fluency is likely to develop if the following conditions are met. The learners take part in activities where all the language items are within their previous experience. So as cliche as it may sound, experience is the best teacher. So the learners take part in activities where all the language items are within their previous experience. This means that the learners work with largely familiar topics and types of discourse, making use of known vocabulary and structure. So we don't expose our learners and give them something so unfamiliar. Everything is not familiar. It's not good. It's not okay. Then the activity is meaning focused. We have to make sure they know the meaning, they understand the meaning, so that we can get the learner's interest. Okay, because if they also know the message. They were able to grasp the message, and they know and the subject to the real-time pressures and demands of normal meaning focused communication. So we have to make sure learners know the meaning. Okay, let's not teach something and then they don't know the meaning. That we have to make sure they know the meaning, because if they know the meaning, it would be easier for them to remember and learn, okay, the vocabulary. That's why the activity is meaning focused. There is support and encouragement for the learner to perform at a higher than normal level. Okay, this means that in an activity with a fluency development goal, learners should be speaking and comprehending faster, hesitating less, and using larger planned chunks than they do in their normal use of language. Let us now look at a range of activities that put into practice the three conditions of easy demands, meaning focus, and opportunity to perform at the higher than normal level. Since as much as possible, we are ascending, di ba? So, magkaanam gid og kataas ang level. So, let's try to take a look at. So, blown up books is one activity. It is a useful way of using listening to introduce learners to reading and getting them excited about reading. These very large books have pages which are about 8 times the size of ordinary pages, and they contain plenty of pictures. Usually we use this one, or mga big books, diba? We use this one to to teach, or to teach vocabulary to our learners, mga younger. Even it would also work good with junior and senior high school. Probably come along with pictures, diba? Short text, but then it's something that is of their previous experience, the theme, it's familiar. Because they are so large, they can be shown to the whole class while the teacher reads them aloud, and all the learners can see the words in the picture. So you have to create this. Listening to stories. It's also good or suitable for learners who read well but whose listening skills are poor. The teacher chooses an interesting story, possibly a graded reader, and reads aloud a chapter each day to the learners. So you can have it in chunks. So daily kinahanglan class nga the entire story will be read. So it could be a chunk per day. So mura ba siya og telenovela, or mura ba siya drama, or something that they look forward to. Para interesting gani ang scene. So it's something unsa kay mga mahitabo next meeting, no, sa atong story nga gisunod. So pura bag nagisubaybayan nila. The learners just listen to the story and enjoy it. While reading the story, the teacher sits next to the blackboard and writes any word that our learners might not recognize in their spoken form. And that's it, di ba? Pwede na siya. Now we can talk about it, and then let's, ara na mag-start nga, nag-learn na sila sa vocabulary. Okay, so this is it, class, for the teaching of vocabulary to our learners, or materials for the teaching of vocabulary. Well, in our output, of course, we will be creating a material. So remember all the activities that I, of course, shared. Since from the materials for the teaching of grammar, then karon materials for the teaching of vocabulary, because I will be asking you to create lesson plan, diba? Lesson plan for these, and this will be your practice. So anyway, also don't forget for the question that you also have to answer during the feedbacking. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. This is it for our lesson 2, materials for the teaching of vocabulary. All right, so I hope, class, you learned a thing or two, and I hope that I explained it well. And if you have questions, you can ask it on our group chat or on the Google Classroom. Or you can also ask me during the feedbacking session. During the feedbacking session, don't forget to make sure you know the questions that are on the slides. Okay, there was one question on lesson 1 and another one question under lesson 2, so that you will know exactly what are the things that you are going to answer. So okay, so thank you very much, class, for watching. And also I will be posting another video very, very short that you will love as well. It's not the typical video that I am posting on my channel. So I hope you're going to take a look at and you will keep in a loop with that one. So thank you very much for learning with me, and I will see you on my next one. Bye.